Hats or head coverings for ladies. Trouble was on its way in the form of religious oppression. On Sunday morning in 1983, I took to church Dick Holmes's daughter. Dick was a well-known man in Aylesbury and had 4 daughters and 2 sons. I worked for him as a trainee aerial rigger when I was 15 years old. She'd been through a divorce and was having a very difficult time. I suggested she come with me to church as she was needing help from God. She was dressed in tight black slacks and a short top which showed all her figure. She had long peroxide blonde hair and her face was made up. This mode of dress was a striking contrast to the elderly ladies who dressed very modestly with very little makeup on, and all wore hats to cover their heads in church. Unfortunately, this was too much for Mrs. Everett, who came up to me after the service. I call it a meeting because the meetings of the New Testament churches were not called services. And she said to me, the next time I bring a female to chapel, I must tell her to wear a hat. Mrs. Everett said that all gospel standard churches insisted women cover their heads, and so should we. I responded by saying whatever others do, that was their concern. They were wrong if they enforced the covering of the head upon a non-church member and a woman visitor having no profession of the Christian faith. I said she must raise the matter at our church meeting. This spirit of legalism naturally took me back. Here was a young woman in severe distress, needing the mercy and love of God as revealed in Jesus Christ, and all Mrs. Everett seemed to be concerned with was the wearing of a hat. I knew the principle of a believing woman dressing modestly and being in subjection to her own husband and covering her head in worship. I also knew the principle of the woman not exercising authority over the man or teaching a man, but this action of Mrs. Everett's, to use the phrase, took the biscuit. I was a man and was being instructed by the woman, Mrs. Everett, in order to insist a visiting unbelieving female wear a hat, in order to uphold the principle that it was a shame for a woman to worship God without a head covering. This covering, according to the scripture, was to show the angels she was in subjection to a man and not usurping authority over him. Mrs. Everett missed the whole point of the gospel, and in her religious zeal to maintain an outward form of religion transgressed the rule she sought to maintain. This religious spirit was not of God, and I believe the gospel needed to be preached to set men free from such darkness. But who was to do this?